This episode is sponsored by The Alcohol Experiment, a free 30-day challenge designed to interrupt your patterns, give you control, restore your health, and put you back in touch with the version of you who doesn't need alcohol to cope, relax, or enjoy life. More than 220,000 people have already tried The Alcohol Experiment for themselves and have seen improved sleep, increased happiness, reduced anxiety, and so much more. Join thousands in this inspiring, hopeful, and exciting program where you examine your beliefs and reconnect with the best version of you without ever feeling like you're missing out. Start today for free at alcoholexperiment.com. Hi, this is Annie Grace, and welcome to this Naked Mind podcast. And I am here with a guest that I'm super excited to speak to. Her name is Arlan. Arlan Hamilton, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Annie.
Oh, thanks for being here. So why don't you sort of back us up to the beginning and tell us about your story and your journey with alcohol?
So I grew up in Texas and didn't touch alcohol until I was, well, I shouldn't say didn't touch. I had maybe a sip here, once or twice out of curiosity, but really didn't start drinking until I was 21 and good and legal. And uh, actually started drinking while had a visit to Europe because somebody introduced me to Bailey's basically, and I'm like, chocolate and alcohol, okay, I can try it. And that began a 15-year situation.
Did you not? Was it because you were like a rule follower, or was it just because it
Oh
had
well,
different?
it really was because I really, when I was a teenager and younger teenager, I saw people in my extended family, not my immediate family, thankfully, but in my extended family, I saw people drunk when I would go visit places, and I just didn't like it. I just really only liked the adults when they were not drinking, and it was a certain time of day or night that they would just sort of flip a switch, and things would get too loose. Things would get too, wait, who's minding the store? I don't know if anybody could drive us to a hospital if there was an emergency or something, and that feeling, I said, well, I'm just not going to drink. I don't need alcohol. I don't know what it does to me, so I don't need it. There's no upside. And in fact, very early relationships as a young woman, I just was like, I don't want the other person to drink either, and I just don't want it around me. Um, but then when I was on this trip and everybody was drinking, everybody was having fun, and I was 21, and I thought, well, at least I'm certainly legal in this country. Have been legal in this other country that I was in for years. And I thought, well, it's like candy. It's not like a full on I'm going down the whiskey train here. It's like I'm having a little bit of candy with alcohol, and that should be just fine. And once it once I had it, and I had a few of these nights with it where I felt like, oh, I'm looser now, and I'm funnier. I must be funnier because everybody's laughing, not realizing that everybody's just drunk and poisoned. So that's why everybody's giggling. But I thought it turned me into something, um, and it gave me a little bit a lighter life. Gave me a little bit of lighter. I could kind of, even that young, had heavy things going on, and so it's like it gave me this lighter lift through life. And so the beginning of it was like, I think a lot of people, where it was just that turned into partying. And I was in the South. I was in Texas and Mississippi during that time, and then I was in California. So I moved to where I am now, and I was in Southern California, and also deeply steeped into the lesbian scene in San Diego and Los Angeles, and it's a party scene, or at least it was then. I don't know what it's like now. I'm more of a homebody now, but it was a party scene, and I was broke all the time and always worried about life and family members and everything, and so I would just go escape 5 nights a week somewhere. I'd take $10 if I could put it together and get a couple drinks and then start chatting with people, and did like a platonic flirt. It was never like it was never to like have somebody buy me a drink, but it was like, what group of people can I endear who will start, buying me drinks so I can keep the party going. And I did that for several years.
I think it's so interesting that you mentioned that in your childhood, one of your thoughts was, who's going to drive us to the doctor? Like that's
Yeah.
such a responsible thought, like for a child to have, right?
Yeah.
And so
I
then
mean,
if
I want to say that I love, love, love my family, and it is such a poison and such a thing that I can now see. But yeah, there were a few times where I felt like, wait a second, like I know that you're not supposed to drive when you're drunk. You're not supposed to make any big decisions, or I had that understanding just very early on observing. And everybody seems to be having a great time, but they seem like they're children to me right now. They seem like they don't have control of their faculties. So who is supposed to help if there's a problem?
well, it's just so interesting because that thought by itself, for a child to have that awareness, for a child to have that thought, is such an overly responsible, heavy thought. And so for you to say that when you started drinking, it was because it felt ease and because you felt the lifting of that, I mean, it just really, I don't know, it makes sense to me a
Hmm.
lot. It wasn't my experience exactly. Like I didn't feel ease or lifting. I more felt like, okay, I'm going to make this my mission to like learn how to drink.
Right.
But it totally makes sense that when somebody is experiencing something that is heavy or is, I would argue, maybe out of character for a child to be having that level of responsibility, because probably circumstances had forced you into that level of
Sure.
responsibility. Of course alcohol becomes something that does, numb and create a different dynamic.
I mean, it did so the whole time. It was a very, there are probably, of the 15 years, there are probably 2 or 3 years where it was actually fun, actually something that I did because I felt I wanted to. But the rest of it, and that wasn't at the beginning or the end, it was like cumulatively. But the rest of it was, I have to just coast because all this stuff is so much to handle and constantly. And I have a pretty good handle on what it was and everything. So it's not like I'm you can't crack me here or something where I'm going to fall apart, but it really was. I mean, for anybody who's listening, and I remember being, what was I was like 27 or 20. I was like 27, I think. And I was living with two roommates from England, and I was in Sherman Oaks, California, which is north of LA, or part of LA. And we there was actually a bar built into the apartment, and it was like the best apartment I've ever had, or I had had to that point. And we were swinging singles and everything, and the bar was always full. And then one day we were getting ready for a little party, like in our house. And so we were putting like these empty bottles in the trash can and getting ready to kind of clean up to do that. And there was these rows of vodka, of vanilla vodka, because again, as you said in your book, things alcohol tastes like crap. So you have to always make a way, Bailey's, now vanilla vodka. Um, and so I had these rows, and I looked at my roommates who were like, partiers, and I was like, hey, jokingly, I was like, hey, who killed all this? Who killed all these bottles? Like getting ready to just call them out, like for fun. And they both looked at me really concerned, uh, more so than they ever had. And they were like, Arlan, you did. And I'm like, what? No, I didn't. There's no way I could have had all of that. There's no way. Like, when did I have the time to have all of that alcohol? And that day is when I realized, oh, I had no idea I was drinking that much. No idea I was drinking that much. And immediately became aware. And from that moment on, that was like halfway through the process, through the journey of it. So 7 or 8, 6 or 7 years in, um, uh, I realized, oh, I have this problem, and then boom, it was in my face. But it was like, what can I do so that every single day just feels lighter than it has the past, 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So was it at that moment that you started to try to cut back or make a change, or did that come later?
That came later. It came later. It was that, I mean, that 2007 and to 2009 period was like the height of all of it was coming together. Because in addition to being in Southern California and being kind of having the personality that I had, I also had like a website that was popular. So anytime I'd go to certain places, people would just buy me drinks. And then I had, in addition to that, I had two friends who were really wonderful people, who who they, for different reasons, one of them because of their family and the other because of their job, had unlimited resources almost. And so they would fight each other friendly to who was going to pay for the tab that night. And so it was enabling, out of this world enabling, because we could get into any place we wanted to. There was always something interesting, it was perceived as interesting going on. It was almost a joke as who's going to be the drunkest. But check this out, the thing we were talking about earlier. If you asked any of the people in that world today, and they came back and told me about this. They said, no matter how much I drank, I always was at the end of the night putting somebody into a cab, always talking to the cab driver. I'm going to, because there was no Uber back then, I'm going to, in 15 minutes, if she's not home, I'm coming after you. I have your, all of this, like stopping people from driving, stopping people from going home with the wrong person, literally pulling people like away from people. And that was kind of like the running joke, was that no matter how drunk I got, I was still the responsible party. Because now that you've kind of mentioned that, it's like I got to make sure that that I can't get so drunk that there's no one left to get us to the hospital,
Mm.
symbolically.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So something core to you is to make sure everybody's taken care of.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so I'm jumping ahead because I do want to get through like
Yeah.
the chronology, but I'm curious, how do you deal with that? Like one of my core things is like, how can I fix this? And so not drinking and having that is
Yeah.
difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult to deal with that. So how do you deal with this responsibility to take care of everybody and not
Oh,
drink?
it's a different vice, but I think it's more productive these days. So you mean these days, like how do I cope?
Yeah.
Well, these days I have this insatiable drive for success, and I don't mean like at any cost. It's just I'm driven, and I am overbearing in how much I'm going to help everybody. So that's another thing. So it's like kind of spilled over
It's
elsewhere, but it's
vehicle.
not as destructive. It's more like you're loving me too much, right? Like if somebody tells me, if a loved one tells me they broke a fingernail, I'm bringing a helicopter in. Like, how can we get the fingernail? How's your finger? And so that has taken a few years to calibrate and not overcompensate as much, because that's my instinct. It's like this savior complex. I have to make sure everybody's okay. And so now what I do is like, um, I, the older I get, the better I am at managing all of that. And anytime I get the anytime I'm like, oh, I would, it would be interesting to have a drink right now in this circumstance. Like if things get too overwhelming, because I have a pretty high stakes job now, and anytime that happens, I just teleport myself back to any sort of hangover.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
to this day, I have still never felt the pain of a worst hangover. No matter, I
Mhm.
mean, all kinds of injury, never felt that kind of pain. And so I always say, if I have that little bitty voice that says, you know what, you can have one. And I'm like, first of all, no, I can't. I don't, there's no such thing as me having just one. It doesn't happen. And second of all, if I do that, I'm just signing up for 30 minutes of a high and 30 hours of feeling like absolute trash.
Yeah, it's so true.
So it just, it,
So
it helps to have that muscle memory because it's like
Yeah, for
you
sure.
don't want that again.
Absolutely. And it sounds like what you've done, which I love, is basically I heard it said once, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, but just this idea of like vehicles can be good for you, good for others, good for the world, or bad for you, bad for others, bad for the world, or any combination of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have found a vehicle that's good for you, good for others, and good for the world, like the
Yeah.
best kind of, because we all need our vehicles. Like that's the thing that like we just do, and to not acknowledge that and to think we're superhuman, like that's ridiculous. So we need the vehicles. But for me, alcohol was bad for me, bad for others, and I don't know what effect it had on the world, but I certainly was an instigator. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. I love that you found this vehicle that is really powerful and in a positive way.
Yeah. I think I had always been a very positive person and always done things that included collaboration and community and you can see that through the arc of my adult life. So that's it was I don't you know it wasn't like I stopped drinking and then I became a better person. And I think that's important to understand. Like you are a good person. You are a better person today when you're drinking. There's just there's a better quality of life for you to celebrate that.
Yeah.
Waiting for you on the other side of something, if that's what you want.
And you could just take away the voices that tell you you're a bad person because you are drinking
Yeah.
more than you intend to. I mean, I
Oh
think that
yeah.
is like,
Yeah. I remember like when I was drinking, I had to towards the end or towards different difficult places. Every single day, I'd wake up and just like as I was nursing a hangover or had gotten to which even worse, which is drank so much that I never had a hangover because I was always drunk. That was terrible. But I would remember every morning for weeks at a time, just waking up and just being like, oh, God, you're so stupid. Why did you do that last night? Like, why did you do that? Why? And that, in no other part of my life do I call myself stupid.
mhm.
I have a very high regard for myself and for other people. But it's only when drinking is that sort of, I call it, it's a monster. It's a beast. It's an actual beast that I can imagine that is just it's taking over. I kind of say this like I say this about money, like when I think about getting ready to buy something, and I tell people like, are you consuming it, or is it consuming
Mm,
you? And so that's how I decide how I'm going to spend money. If it's consuming me and I have to like really fight to pay for it, it's not the right thing. But if I'm consuming it, that's great. So with alcohol, am I am I fooling myself into thinking I'm consuming it? Oh, I'm just consuming it. I'm a consenting adult and I'm just having this little whatever. Or is it like just consuming my life and controlling every moment of my life? Yes, that's the latter is the truth.
I love that distinction. That's such a good one, especially, I mean, for all things oh, I love it so much. That's so good. There was something I was going to follow up with about what you were just saying. Oh, shoot, it's totally lost my mind. Oh, well, let's just continue
Oh,
on your story. I'm sure
I've
it'll
been
come
there
back to me.
every day. Yeah. Oh,
So yeah, go ahead. Like so you had that moment and then it wasn't then that you decided to really start to think about it.
yeah.
What happened next?
So that went on for a while. And then I had in late 2008, I lost a lot of stuff. I lost the company that I had, which was a magazine. I lost a personal relationship. And I got real. I mean, it got really bad, and I considered suicide. And I just was. It was like late 2008. I was in that same apartment with the same roommates, and one night I just like lost my mind, and I was doing so poorly that my one of my best friends, Diane, came to sleep on the couch downstairs to make sure I didn't leave the house. And I snuck past her and I walked the streets to go find something that was destructive. And my hair wasn't done. I didn't have a bra on. I was an absolute mess. And I wasn't drunk. I was going to find something that was just a solution or something. And I was crying and I was just like out in the middle of the street. And then something told me, just keep walking. And I kept walking towards an emergency room. And I walked into the emergency room. It's probably a mile away from my house at like 3 a.m. And I said, I don't know if this is where I'm supposed to be, but I feel like I want to hurt myself. And I don't know what else to do except for that, except for being here. And they just said, this is where you're supposed to be. And they took me to a room. And for 24 or 48 hours, I can't remember how much, they had a police officer stand outside the room because I was at that. That's what they had to do, the protocol. And I called Diane and I called a couple of, like my mom, to tell them I was there. And that was obviously a lifesaver that time. It didn't stop me from drinking, but it was something that was like a mile marker for me to see, because you get kind of lost out to sea. And you to have like a mile marker of like, that was bad. You know, and alcohol is a depressant too. And that's another thing we don't really think about. It's like, it's not just you, it's this thing you're putting into your body every day that's like hacking away at your soul, you know, physically. It's like a thing that's actually scientifically proven to make you feel worse about life. Yeah. And so that was all happening. And so that was a great mile marker. I continued to drink. I decided, well, I'll stop drinking because it makes me feel so bad. So I'll start now infusing food with weed, which was not terrible because, again, California. But then I consumed too much and I hurt myself and just didn't know what I was doing. And so I went back to alcohol. Then it was, I can't remember exactly when, but there were 2 times that I quit. And the second time was your book. And the first, and that lasted. And the first time was probably 2010-ish, something like that, at what I would have been 30, right before 30, I remember. So that was, I went out with this same group of friends and we drank incredible amount. And then I went out with a second group of friends, just a couple people, and we went to a bar where they knew the bartender, and they were just pouring drinks without payment. Because remember, I'm broke this whole time, so that was kind of like the only thing that would stop me. And I stopped drinking. I stopped counting at 13 Jack Diets. Stopped counting at 13 Jack and Diets. Probably poured generously because of this friendship. So the last thing I remember is slow dancing with a woman who was celebrating her 50th birthday when I was 29, who was straight, by the way, who was waiting for her daughter to come to the bar. Slow dancing to that Lady Antebellum, I Need You Now song. Don't know this woman's face, couldn't tell you was not attracted to her. It was just, I was just so stupidly drunk. And what followed was the absolute worst hangover I've ever had. It was, I probably should have gone to a hospital to have my stomach pumped, but I didn't. I could not get out of bed to open the door for someone to bring me food. So another friend came over and dropped food into a window to the floor, and I crawled to get it in order to just be able to eat that day. And it just lasted for like 2 or 3 solid days. So that I said, I'm going to die. I'm going to end up drinking myself to death physically. My heart's going to stop. And I didn't have any other way. I didn't really like an experience that I had at AA. Like I'd gone with a friend to see what it's like. And I have a kind of a religious background that's more cult than religion, and that I just didn't like the vibe of it. It just didn't work for me. So I wasn't going to go do that, but I knew I had to do something because I did want to live. So I locked myself in this guest house that I was in. I got DVDs. I got food, and then I literally sat on my hands and shook back and forth and watched DVDs for hours and forced myself not to get a drink. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, I think. It was so physically and mentally draining. And I got past a certain number of days and I hadn't had a drink. And that was the first time in years I had gone a day without drinking. Um, and I quit for a year and a half. And every day for that year and a half, I wanted to drink. And I missed it. And I couldn't go to bars. I couldn't go to restaurants that had a bar in it. I had to excuse myself from social settings that people were drinking. It was a 24-hour struggle not to drink. And we can come back to any part of that, but what I want to do is fast forward a little bit to your book. The distinction in stopping, besides the amount of time it's been, which has been years, is that there's not been a day where I've been longing for a drink. It is such a different, you know what I mean? Like the one before was, you're going to die, you better stop, this is your only chance, but don't you miss it so much. And this other one, which was like, which I really want to tell that story of how that came about, has been, I mean, people can, if I were in a room right now with people just going at it, drinking right now, I'd be fine. I'd be like, okay, good for you. I'll be here with the, wet napkin, the wet towel in the morning when you need me. I'll hold your hair in the morning because wouldn't want to be you right now. And that's the difference. There may be a tinge here and there, and I think that's normal. But that day to day is just wonderful. It's a wonderful freedom.
Oh my gosh, it's like making me so emotional because, you put something out into the world and it helps yourself. And one of the coolest moments in my journey has actually been when I had my brother texted me a picture of an article in Fast Company that you had written, and you mentioned This Naked Mind. And
that's great.
It was just like so overwhelmingly cool for me. Like I was just like, it was just amazing. And
that's so cool.
And to hear that that's been impactful for someone like you, like I see what you're doing in the world, and I don't know, it's just amazing. Like I'm really emotional about it because I feel like it's just such an honor to like have had a little bit of an impact, and the impact you're making, and it's just really cool. So thank you for sharing that with me. It's just awesome. So
thank you.
I remembered what I was going to say earlier.
Okay.
To get me out of my emotional mess. Anyway, like you didn't sign up for it. What I was going to say is that when you were talking about how it was only alcohol that made you like tell yourself that you were so stupid and that you were so, dumb, and you weren't doing that. And I think sometimes we have this idea that like we have to go and learn how to be a positive person, or we have to go learn how to like find self-respect. And I think so much of actually positivity is just undoing the negativity, right? Or so much of self-respect is just undoing the things that were like keeping us. And so I think we almost do ourselves a disservice to be like, oh, I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to be someone who like loves myself or respects myself, or I'm just not a positive person. Like you can make so much strides just like taking away whatever is, like instead of looking at it as like the mountain I have to climb, look at it as like, what do I have to take away?
Yeah.
Back in touch.
Yeah.
With the thing that was authentic to me anyway, because you said you were positive your whole life, right? And then this has invoked like a negativity. So I just thought that was worth saying. But, so anyway, that's so awesome. And so yeah, that first time, I mean, the strength involved in that first time, I have to say, is just really badass. I mean, like just being able
Can I tell you, at the same time, I also became not vegan, but vegetarian for the first time. Growing up in Texas, where everything is fried, like fry a shoe if they could, and everything is meat. And so that same year and a half, I also became a vegetarian, like just a few weeks later after stopping drinking. And I remember that time very fondly because of how I felt. I could taste food again. and that was all alcohol, right? And people who are smoking, I think they have the same experience. Like you can taste, I could taste food, and then like without being too Disney, like literal colors were less muted. Like I could see colors as a real color. Like, oh, that's what the color, that's what the sky looks like. Great. And I had a joke with one of my friends who is one of my biggest enablers, and she'll admit it. But we we decided to do like a random sober night back before all this happened, when in the height of things, just for fun, because it was so ridiculous that it was considered like a fun, it was like a vacation to be sober. And we went to our old haunt, like the same haunts we go to every night, just to see what it's like to be the sober person. And we realized there was like a nail shop across the street from a place that we had said for like weeks that this girl had wanted to find a good nail place. It was right there next to the place we were drinking every day because we didn't see it. We noticed that the ceiling of one of the places that we used to go to was beautiful. Like the ceiling was just incredible, beautiful art. And we had no idea because we'd never looked up. We'd always been looking forward at other people or looking down at our shoes because 30 minutes in, you're drunk. And so that time where I didn't have alcohol and I am back to eating meat, but I just really did enjoy that experience. But it was tough. It was really tough. To have all of that going on. And so I made a decision just to kind of close out what happened, like the rest of it. I made a decision after I'd come back to LA, moved back to LA 5-6 times in my life. But after I came back again and I had a really, really bad, like emotion, like a personal, it wasn't a breakup, but it was like a heartbreak. And I just was like, okay, I'm going to drink again because that's what I'm going to do. It's going to be fine. It'll be fine. I'll just have a couple. Never had a couple. I've never had a couple of drinks. So it was just back in the same thing and bad and bad. And so that lasted a long time. Fast forward to 2015, after 35 years of living below the poverty line, I start raising a venture capital fund, which is what you do when you're broke, apparently. And things are going well. I've always been it's like a very productive drunk. That's another hard thing, is that I've always been someone that you didn't know I had an alcohol problem because I was so darn productive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in that place. Everything is going really well, especially compared to the rest of my years. And I'm like you said, there's Fast Company. I'm like this, and the cover hadn't happened yet. That happened when I was sober, but all this stuff was starting to happen, and I was making these great decisions and really changing my life. And the only thing that could tell me what to do, like I was a very powerful person, right? But the only thing that could tell me what to do was alcohol. And it was that, combined with the fact that one day she's my wife now and was my girlfriend then, told me that when she's German, and so she would come to visit for several weeks at a time. And she told me that one night after a concert where I drank myself silly by myself for no good reason, came home, couldn't even see straight. She said she slept outside of the bed because she didn't want to be in the bed with me if I threw up. And she said she slept sat against the wall outside of the bedroom to listen to me breathe, to make sure I didn't choke on my own vomit or stop breathing for other reasons. And she's the best relationship I've ever had, and the loveliest human. And that is not a burden that other people should bear for you. And so that combined with the fact that it was also just not fun anymore. It had stopped being fun years past. It was just like I started calling it my medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get my medicine today. I'm either going to get the medicine or I'm going to eat. And sometimes it won because of the lack of capital, right? So all of that, I said, okay, I'm going to have to check myself into rehab, because now I had the means to do that. I said, I'm going to check myself into rehab. It's going to throw all of my progress in my career for a loop because it's going to take a while, but I'm going to do that. So I started researching what's the fastest way of doing this? Thinking it's going to be like the last time where it's going to be like such a struggle for the rest of my life. Oh my goodness. And I said, well, let me do one more thing. Let me try one more thing, because I had tried hypnotism and I tried all this stuff that didn't work. So let me just try an audible book or audio book, right? Because I've just let's try that. I haven't tried that because logic. I'm a very logical person, and I thought if I can be logicked into this, maybe it'll help. So I looked at a lot of books. There were a lot of books, and I saw on Amazon. I mean, I looked through. I don't know what made me go to your book because there were so many, right? But I went to Amazon and I just saw like comment after comment after comment. It was like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. This is the best. And then, there were a couple of negative comments, but I don't look at negative. I know where the source comes from, right? It's like, really? Okay. You had time to say all that? Like, really? But like, I just saw, I'm like, well, the thing I know is that it won't hurt. It may waste my time. I'm out of a few days and whatever, but it won't hurt me. So, let's try it before I go to rehab. So that weekend was West Hollywood Pride weekend. And can I tell you what? It's like 100,000 people or more. Alcohol is like oxygen. And I lived in West Hollywood. So there was a parade route was outside of my door. So I decided that weekend was the weekend I was going to try to listen to a book about sobriety. Because I'm just a genius. I don't know. So I start on like a Friday, and it was the Friday of that Pride, and it was the year that Brandy was there, I believe. I think it was that year. And so this is 2017, I believe. I think it was 2017. It might have been a different year that Brandy was there. I might be getting too conflated, whatever. And the first thing I remember here, because I did the audible version because I wanted to be kind of hypnotized a little bit, but it's not a hypnotism. And the first thing I remember you saying is, you can drink while you read this book. And I was like, oh, this is a party. Like, I can deal with that. She's not telling me to like change my life overnight. She's like, I can still drink? Oh, I'm gonna do it. But you said, but don't drink while you're reading it. You can still drink in your life, but don't drink while you're reading it. So I said, okay. So that was like it was logical again. So Friday, I listened to it over 5 days. And I would just listen to it. And there were so many times where I was listening to it, and I was by myself, and I was like, yep. Yes. I was like reacting to it the same way people react to my book now. I'm like, yes, girlfriend. And I go to Pride. And of course, again, I have VIP tickets. I have all the alcohol I want. I'm in a situation where things are cool. I'm backstage, quote unquote, all of that. And so I'm just drinking my little butt off. And then next day, hangover, wake up, don't drink, listen to the book. And I'm like, this is a good book. Like, it's a good book. I don't think it's going to do the trick though, because it's just a book. So I'm just kind of like, giving it its due respect, but I'm not like, whatever. So I go through that. And the last night of Pride, which is like Sunday night, I'm so drunk that I call the same Diane. She's with me the whole time in life, saving my butt. And I call her, I'm like, everything's closed. We got to get a last nightcap. We got to get something. And she's like, I'm tired, So I'm like drinking to the very end. Monday comes and goes. And then on Tuesday, like Monday night or something, I finished the book. And I had a routine in West Hollywood, in my place. I would not drink until about 6 o'clock, which is p.m., because I was a responsible adult now. Because we used to be, I could drink whenever I had food. And that was like 10 a.m. and on, I was drinking. But now as a responsible adult, I had a routine that I would drink. I would pour myself a drink to watch Rachel Maddow. And then I would drink until I passed out, no matter what was going on, no matter who was with me. And that, to me, felt responsible. So I do all that. I go to get my drink that's already waiting for me, which now is whiskey, I believe. And I go to get it and to put my Diet Coke in it. And I'm like, no, it was Tito's. It was Tito's vodka, which again tastes like vanilla. because you needed to have something that doesn't taste like alcohol. I go to reach for it in my little cupboard because that's when I had kept it. And I just go, because I finished your book. I thought, oh, that was cute. And I move on. I go to reach for it and I don't want it. And I'm like, what the heck? And usually, if I have this big explosion of, I'm not drinking for 24 hours, I would take any bottle I had and pour it down the drain because I hate it, because you're not going to get me this time. I didn't even do that. I just put it back in and I closed the door. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Maybe she hypnotized me for a day. The next day, I go to do my routine. I open the cupboard. I'm like, oh, it's Maddo o'clock. I don't want it. And it just sat there. And I haven't had a drink since then.
So cool. It's the coolest shit I've ever heard.
Isn't that crazy? I haven't had a drink since then because it's like, why would I want a drink? After I understand the logic of it. After I understand that it's kind of bamboozled me my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I want it? And no one's perfect and no one's like, I think there's just a beautiful freedom and understanding, like, it's not this bogged down disease, that sort of excuse that you can always have as a cloak. Like, well, I have a disease and so of course I'm going to drink again. Well, no, it's not. It's just a poison that you're addicted to because that's what it was made to do. And you have the power over it. And it's just a whole new day. And I believe that I could have accomplished a great bit while still drunk, drunk. I believe I could because I have been driven my whole life. But I absolutely know 100% without a doubt that I would not have been on the cover of Fast Company. I would not have invested in 180 companies. I would not be a venture catalyst, as they call me. I would not have had this level of success if I was still fighting the demon, the monster of alcohol every single day. And I know for a fact, as lovely and as loving as my wife Anna is, she would not have married me. She would have had to go and save herself. Mm-hmm. So everything that is good and that I have been able to accomplish and hold on to in the past almost 4 years is due to not having alcohol in my life, and also due to the fact that you wrote your book.
That's so cool. So cool. Can we talk more about everything you've accomplished and your book? Because I know you and have followed you, but I know that, a lot of people might not know you. So I'd love to hear just, in your own words, especially like just the idea of being underestimated, being our greatest advantage, and all that sort of stuff.
So at around 35, I launched a venture capital firm called Backstage Capital. I had been on food stamps and homeless. I had lived at the airport in San Francisco for a while leading up to this. But for several years prior, I had seen the disparities in the amount of capital that goes to anyone who's not a white man in startup land, in Silicon Valley, tech startups, etc. So 90% of all venture funding, that is the funding that's meant to kind of kickstart all of these innovative things like Twitter and Apple and Slack and all of that, goes to white men in a country where they make up a third of the country. And so as a Black gay woman from the South with no connections in Silicon Valley, I just looked at that and said, man, the entrepreneur side of me really feels a kinship to this world. But the reality is it wasn't built for me. And I wonder how a lot of other people are feeling. So I set out on this goal to research, and the more I researched and just immersed myself in this information, the more I understood, oh, there is a complete blind spot here. It could be interesting if somebody were to only invest in underrepresented founders. And in fact, most of the investors who have invested in me to do that are white men, because they're like, yeah, that's stupid. It's stupid that we're getting 90% when we make up a third. They get it. And these are competitive people, right? So they understand, okay, somebody. But the thing is, because I can relate to a lot of the founders and kind of go in and find some diamonds in the rough and find some people who are just, I'm the least, what is the word? I can't even, it's going to be funny what I'm going to say because I can't think of the word, but it's like the most traditionally educated person at my company. I'm the least, like we're talking about like the founders who we've invested in have like, masters, PhDs, doctorates, all of that. But they've just been overlooked because of one reason or another. And so it took 3.5 years to get my first investor, but in 2015 I got an angel investment from a woman named Susan Kimberlin in Silicon Valley, and it was a kickoff for me. And it was, I've raised millions since then, and so it was a smaller amount, but I'll never forget it. It's like that first yes that I talk about. So I've taken that, built that out to 180 plus investments. I have a joint venture with Mark Cuban where he put in $6 million for us to invest in about 50 companies out of that. And I'm from Dallas, so that was, that's a really cool moment. I've been on the cover of Fast Company in 2018, and I was the first non-celebrity Black woman to do so. And so before me was Beyonce, Serena, and Oprah. But there had never been like a tech person or a venture person on the company of a Fast Company, which is a business tech magazine. And I have a book that came out in May of 2020 called It's About Damn Time: How to Turn Being Underestimated into Your Greatest Advantage. And I chronicle my life story, and I also give a lot of tactical ways that people can kind of come into their own and figure out what their purpose is. And it wasn't meant to be a self-help book, but it's certainly become that. It's a business book. It's in the business imprint, so there's a lot of that if you're a budding entrepreneur, if you're aspiring, or if you've already been in the game for a while and want to have a little disillusionment and want a little bit of another kickstart. I think it's very helpful there because people are getting a lot out of it. And yeah, that's what we're working on. Have a team all over the country, and we're just on this path to provide resources and capital for this underestimated founders, not as a philanthropic effort, but because we have a lot of time to make up for, which is why I called the book that.
I love that. Oh, everything about that just gives me goosebumps. It's amazing. Congratulations. It's
Thank you.
Incredible.
Thank you.
And I just I just can't wait to watch where you go. I mean, it's just going to be amazing. It's going to be unreal. So cool.
Yeah. I've just unlocked a lot of, since I was a kid, I was like, I'm going to go for the moon. Right. But the same way I was able to, I don't want to make you cry, but the same way I was able to like
emotional day.
But the same way I was able to see colors better the first time I quit, and then of course the second time. That's how I was able to see like the tapestry of what my life could be, and that's when things like unlocked for me. And I'm not the type of person who just kind of, I'm not like overly Disney or overly flowery with my words. It's just so accurate and true what I've experienced here. And it's just so true. Like, in fact, when my office said, do you want to do this podcast? Because I get asked to do a lot of podcasts. I'm like, because usually I say I can only do like 20 minutes because of my voice or because of time, and I say no to probably 80%. And they said it's Annie Grace and it's This Naked Mind. And I'm like, this woman saved my life. So yeah, we can do an hour or we can do whatever amount of time she wants.
I appreciate it so much.
So
I really do. I don't know. I was so excited when you said yes, and just super excited. And I think I was just before this, I was on an interview with insider.com. I don't know, some media outlet, but she was just trying to ask what was different. And I think the crux of what you're saying and the crux of what is different, and I'm finally able to put it into words, is I think there's 3 real pillars to change. And it's knowledge, emotion, and action. And rehab and AA, they put action first. And they discount emotion and knowledge. And it sets you up for failure. And then you become in this cycle of hating yourself and losing trust in yourself and losing faith in yourself. And like This Naked Mind, like, I don't want action first. That's why at the beginning of the book, I'm like, keep drinking. Don't give me action until I've got your knowledge going and your emotion changes. And then the action is going to be more successful. And I feel like I was finally able to like articulate that just now. So I was like, I'm going to say it here again, because I feel like everything you're saying just makes that, like, that's why, that's why it worked.
Yeah, the title of your book, This Naked Mind, the way I look at it, I'm hoping this is what you meant by it, is like you're trying to re like kind of deconstruct everything that we've been
Yes.
taught, everything that we believe about alcohol, and make it a naked tapestry, and a naked canvas,
Yes,
and then
exactly. Get back to where we were
build it.
before, because we were
Yeah,
all there before, before it snuck its way
yeah.
in.
At 6
Yeah.
years old, you're not thinking, like, well, let me go to the club.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I think it's
Oh,
brilliant. I think it's brilliant, especially for someone like me. I have you have to make it make sense for me. Like, why are we, And I look at investments, for instance, over and over again, and I have to go through these different things down this checklist of why would we invest, even if with the greatest story and the greatest this, why would we invest? And so this book, and I think a lot of it had to do with it being audio too, because I feel like you are able to it's sort of like a friend just telling you what's up, and you're like, oh, it's the same way where I go flash back to 2007 or 8, where I'm like, who killed all these bottles? And they're like, my friend is saying you did. And I think it's that same sort of thing of that mirror.
that's awesome. Well, Arlen, it's just, I mean, like I said, thank you so much for your time and for saying yes. I've been excited and nervous about this, and just awesome. And watching you change the world is from just amazing. I love it. You're one of the very few reasons I get on Instagram to see what you're doing.
Oh, I
And
appreciate that so much. So
yeah,
much.
it's really, really amazing what you're doing. I mean, seeing the thing that was in front of all of us that nobody else could see, and then doing something about it, is just the coolest. So I just really appreciate it. I don't know why I'm so emotional. It's like ridiculous. I'm embarrassed, but
It's totally cool. It's totally cool. So I don't know you well enough to know if you were
I'm not.
Okay.
It's not wonderful.
Well,
But
I
anyway, I
appreciate
just appreciate it, and it's just so cool to see, and yeah, it's just awesome. It's an honor. So thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, and very happy to have been able to tell this story in this place.
Cool.
Hey, it's Annie Grace. I want to tell you about the most important book that I never wrote, and I mean that. This is This Naked Life. It's 48 true stories of people finding freedom from alcohol, and it's so inspiring. It's our stories, as you know from this podcast, that truly change us, that revolutionize what we believe is possible for ourselves. So it's This Naked Life. You can find it on Amazon or check it out online. Even download it 100% free at nakedlifestories.com. And every single copy that you buy, all the proceeds are 100% committed to keeping the alcohol experiment forever free for anybody who needs it. So check it out. It's such an inspirational book. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.